Now, the World Health Organization has urged governments to pull out all the stops to slow the spread of COVID-19. Worldwide, the virus has infected 98,000 people and killed over 3,300. European health ministers are holding a key meeting in Brussels this Friday to address the issue. Here in France, the government raised the level of the outbreak from stage 1 to stage 2. And the worst outbreak in Europe has been in Italy, where more than 3,000 people are infected. The Italian government recently took the decision to shut schools and universities there. For more, let's speak to Dave Keating in Brussels. Dave, tell us more about today's meeting. What steps are health ministers considering?
Yeah, those national health ministers have been called here to the European Council for an emergency meeting on how to better coordinate the coronavirus response. So far, we've seen a really piecemeal response among EU member states, some countries taking very drastic actions, other countries taking no actions at all. Of course, that reflects the disparity in cases across Europe. Some EU member states still don't have any cases, but the EU wants to get a better handle over everyone going in the same direction here. Now, that's difficult because health is not an EU competence. It's still in the hands of national governments, but there are some measures that the EU can take. After the 2009 H1N1 crisis, the EU gained the ability to declare a state of emergency across the EU. Now, the European Commission has not triggered that yet, but that remains a possibility, and that's probably one of the things they're going to discuss today. The other is what aid can be done under current measures without declaring that state of emergency. Under the EU's civil protection rules, Italy has already declared help in getting face masks, but other countries have not yet granted that request. They're worried about giving all their face masks to Italy and then having the crisis break out in their country and not having any. So they're going to discuss possibly public procurement, a way of the EU countries coming together and purchasing enough face masks for everyone so that there's enough to go around. But in terms of options, the health ministers are going to be at a little bit of a loss here because it is difficult to coordinate these responses, even with the new tools that the EU has in its tool belt.
Dave, you mentioned some of the responses from various EU member states. How have the EU institutions themselves been reacting?
Yeah, the EU institutions have been very heavily affected by this. We've already had cases. We have one case here in the European Council where I am now, and EU institutions have been reacting differently. The European Parliament last week canceled all events for the next 3 weeks scheduled in the Parliament building and banned all external visitors. Only staff and MEPs can go inside. And just yesterday, the European Parliament decided to cancel its Strasbourg session next week. They will meet here in Brussels. That hasn't happened in many years, and it's extremely politically sensitive because of the two-seat issue. French officials and French MEPs are furious with this decision, with some, even Jean-Luc Mélenchon in France, calling this an attempt to use the coronavirus to end the Strasbourg sittings, because, of course, the members of the European Parliament don't want to go to Strasbourg. They've voted to only have a single seat. But this reflects the international nature of these institutions. People come from all over Europe for these meetings, and the institutions themselves even move around. The Parliament, of course, famously travels between Brussels and Strasbourg. The Council holds meetings 3 months out of the year in Luxembourg, and ministers meet across Europe. Right now, they're meeting in Croatia. And so the virus, which is restricting international travel and gatherings, is posing a real difficulty for the European Union because its bread and butter is international travel and gatherings. Even lots of events in Brussels have been canceled as well, which is going to have a big effect on the city of Brussels. So the EU is struggling to deal with this, to say the least.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. Dave Keating reporting from Brussels.